G'day, Tom. Great to see you again, mate. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, good, Hutch. How are you?
Really well, mate. Thank you. Tough season at Holbrook last year and a lean start to this one.
Yeah, certainly the last couple of years has been a real challenge. Anyway, we got our prices back and we've got our season back, so hopefully it continues.
And Tom, a bit of a shout out to your son Hamish, who I think's made the Waratahs rugby squad. That's a real credit to him, mate. How's he getting on?
Yeah, no, he's going well. Yeah, he certainly enjoys his rugby. And, always as a 17-year-old, it keeps him busy anyway.
All 2 metres of him?
Yeah, yep. No, it's certainly pretty hard to fill up these teenage boys.
Just to kick us off, mate, would you mind just giving everyone a bit of an overview of what KF7 is and what you've recently achieved by way of the launch of that at the MLA kitchen?
Yeah, so on Monday we launched our KS7 brand in conjunction with Meat Livestock Australia, Endeavour Meats, and also Matt Moran from well-known celebrity chef. Just a bit of context, the biggest research finding of the last 20 years in lamb is the higher the marbling, the increase in consumer enjoyment, overall liking, juiciness and tenderness. So, yeah, Sheep CRC did some really good work based on that. Australia's average marbling is 7%. New Zealand's would be under 2. Europe would probably be about 2. So really what it's doing is trying to get a product that's graded over 7%, typically averaging about 8, and putting them all in the same boxes and trying to create more value through the supply chain into better markets. So, yeah, it's taken a while. The limitation has been our ability to grade. The technology, we just haven't been able to nail it. Now the technology's working, we can really grade and certainly reward those producers who hit 7% plus.
So, Tom, it truly is the Wagyu of lamb and it's a world's first. So, mate, congratulations on that. Just in the last 6 to 12 months, practically, what has it taken to get to there just practically in this last sort of chapter?
Well, there's been Endeavour Meats have been working with a pro-based technology. So really what you want to be able to do is grade lambs on the slaughter floor. So when they come through the boning room, you want to have them in their grade. So therefore you can put, say, the 5 to 7s in boxes, the below 5s in a box, the over 7s in a box. So that's just been it's almost a machine learning technology. It's a calibration exercise. The other flip side, it's actually trying to drive value in the chefs. So it's amazing, and I always laugh, when we hit $100 a kilo for cutlets, a lot of people said, that's ridiculous. Lamb, it's too expensive. On that same butcher shop, we launched $100 a kilo. There was beef retailing at $200 and no one batters an eyelid. So, yeah, there's obviously now we've got a real opportunity to try and educate the chefs, the benefits of high marbling lamb, and then trying to get that value to flow all the way back to a stall lamb producer who supplies a Hampshire Down cross lamb for the program.
And Tom, is it a short list of processes that can separate KF7 from other grades?
Yeah, we're only using one processor. I'm led to believe there's only 2 processors in the country who can actually grade those sort of lambs. I think that's going to change. I certainly have heard a lot about, some of the bigger processors starting to adopt grading technology. But all in all, it's how beef's gone. Beef is very much quality-based supply chain, and we've seen huge transition of the feeding, the branding, the marketing of beef. And really, I see lamb has just got to follow that trajectory to really keep its place in the world.
Tom, reflecting back further, how long have you had the vision to achieve a high marbling lamb product, and what's it taken over time? How long's it taken and what's it taken?
We went on that path in 2012. I tell you, it's interesting. You look at, you'll often see, plenty of people, going back 20 years ago in the beef industry, and you look at, say, the Hereford breed. I can remember my father was a Hereford breeder for nearly 40 years, and you look at such a great breed that's been decimated in the Australian cattle herd. The one reason, it didn't have eating quality as it does now in places, but certainly, when Angus got that roll on, when Wagyu got that roll on, it was all based around eating quality. So seed stock, you've got to look 10 years out. A lot of people in agriculture get to be hindsight experts. They get to look at benchmarking data, or they get to look at market reports and actually really see that. But seed stocks, it's a 10-year process. So we're going to look 10 years out to see what the environment our sheep are going to be in. And we can see it coming. And, hence we try and reposition our business and our clients' business towards where we see the future is going to be.
Overnight success, 15 years in the making, mate.
100%. And, now all of a sudden you look, what does 2035 look like, because really the decisions we make now, I often say the rams we sell this year will have daughters still in the system in 2035. So, we have got such a long window to look at how we breed and how that impacts it. So, yeah, you've got to be a bit futuristic, I suppose, as a seed stock producer.
And Tom, 2 questions, if I could. How have you done it practically? Can you give us the layman's version of how it is that you've arrived to a Marble 7 product? And what impact do you see it having on the industry for the long term?
So really, when you follow Angus and beef, and I often say nothing I've done has ever been inventive or innovative. It's just really getting well-known technology from other industries. And you look at beef, so really all the Wagyu did was really become an outlier for marbling. Genetically, it's been bred in Japan for 100 years, with a marbling focus which suits their cuisine. So, and really, if you look at the Wagyu pedigrees, a lot of them come back to the same Japanese bulls back in Japan 30 years ago. And Angus are pretty much the similar. So for us, it's about finding outliers, not only within the breeds we were looking within. We had Dorsets, we had, our prime line maternals, but it's actually looking, is there any breeds hidden under a rock that actually could offer that? And that's where the Hampshire Down came in. At the time, the kids had a small flock, and we actually started doing a bit of testing. And basically what we found out, the Hampshire Down was streets ahead of everything else. So Kinross Station Hampshire Down was based around the inherent benefit of a few strains of Hampshire Down sheep, which are basically, they're about 1.5 to 2% above any other sheep for marbling in the country at the time.
And what impact do you think this new lamb product's going to have for the long term?
Well, the simple science, if a client in the Kinross Station Hampshire Down program hits a marble score 7, it's $1 a kilo dress weight. So that's $35 a lamb. Now, that lamb hasn't cost any more to produce. It's eaten the same amount of feed. It's probably grown at the same growth rate. So to me, that's a lot of money. Typically our best consignments of lambs can hit about 50% 7. Now, that same consignment, if genetically we can find a +3 ASBV for marbling, all of a sudden that can become 70%. So you can see the impact on genetics, and that flows right back, right through. So our racks, are over $70 a kilo for our racks. That's on wholesale price. Typical commodity racks are $32. So what we've got to do as an industry is discover how we can create more value in our supply chain, because costs are going up all the time. Insurance, input costs, labour, everything we do is continually going up. So I see as a trajectory, it's a really important part of trying to create value in the products we produce.
I really appreciate you sending me through your newsletter that sort of speaks to 5 key points that you think are imperative for the industry. Just before we get into those, just a couple of questions. I interviewed Simon Quilty, and he's bullish about the red meat price, certainly for the medium term. He predicted 10 and we've seen 12, and he thinks that maybe 9.50 can become the new norm, which is really encouraging. What's your read on what we can expect in market in the red meat space?
I think there's certainly a rapid flock reduction. And in the last 3 years, we've had a significant reduction in the amount of sheep, and we've had a significant increase in the amount of processing capacity in Australia. So the two together, create pretty buoyant times. I think 9 is the new 8. Certainly I can see the next 12 months to 2 years. Absolutely, I can see 9.50s all day long. However, Probably, I'd say, low nines is probably a more sustainable term. We've got cost of living crisis around the world. But if, irrespective of that, I think it's really optimistic times. And unfortunately, the bloodshed of 2023, which drove a lot of people out of sheep, is actually going to have a silver lining. A low sheep flock is a good sheep flock for the people who are still in there.
Thanks, Tom. Before we get into the newsletter, just a couple of questions. What is the problem that you see, and what are the headwinds that you think are facing sheep meat growers sort of in the short term?
I think sheep have got a couple of challenges. The number one issue I see moving forward is labour efficiency. Being able to, attract labour. Sheep are very finicky things compared to, say, cropping and cattle. You can go and crop 100,000 acres with an agronomist and some pretty flash gear without a lot of labour. Sheep, the issue is it's been built on, say, the jackaroos. Hutch, when we were going through the hay plain, would have had hundreds of jackaroos. Warren, all those areas, we hundreds and hundreds of jackaroos as well. So you had such a big network and a progression from school coming into the sheep industry, then going to uni, probably not as much in those days, but still that progression was there. Now, a lot of people either go on cropping operations, they might go to Canada in a cropping operation, and or they'll go up north and be, on a cattle place. So we've sort of lost that supply base of labour. And when I say labour, also skilled labour. So sheep, there's a couple of issues to start with. The first thing, we've actually got to attract young people. We're 65 years of age, or 62 to 65, our average age. I understand from ABARE that number was low 50s around the turn of the century. So that tells you we've got a rapid escalation of sheep farmer age. And remembering, and Hutch, at 65, do you want to be drenching sheep and flying sheep, and that's going to become an issue. So really, there's a couple of key things. It's attracting youth, and I don't think the sheep industry's done a really good job at that. Young people like science. Young people also like visibility. They like to see where their product goes. They like information flow back, quality-based grades. The sheep industry hasn't offered that, where, beef has certainly gone down that path. So, that's, I see, in the short term, the medium term, we've got to be able to overcome. We can't be in a situation in 10 years' time where the average sheep producer is low 70s.
Tom, as you travel around to your clients, do you agree with that stat? I imagine the ABARE stat is around who owns the land, but it might well be that they do have their next generation coming through and that's not reflected in the stat. But practically, do you see that ageing population in the industry that you speak to?
I think on average, yes. However, the change where we've seen that young generation, absolutely right, Hutch, that's landowner. Typically, in a lot of those cropping areas, so if we say Temora, a lot of those areas, what we've seen is that next generation has changed the enterprise. So, we've actually seen, I'd say so many times we've been dealing with a 65-year-old father or mother, but yet the 30-year-old son just wants to pull down the fences. And that's, now we're seeing that probably swing back to cattle. So, yes, that's a landowner, but I think we're seeing a generational issue where next generation is changing enterprise.
Tom, previously I interviewed Brett Stevenson and he gave us his insight into the grain market, and he's suggesting that we might go well below decile 5 for the medium term in grain prices, and there's a structural change there. So it might be that people have gone all in on grains and cropping as a function of the high prices that we've seen, and I wonder if that's to continue.
Well, 100%. And the beauty about cropping are the efficiency gains, the technological gains, but that means someone can put a whole country down to wheat very quickly, which creates huge amounts of wheat. Sheep, you can't do that. So, never in my 30-year career have I been more optimistic for sheep. And really, I often talk selfishly where I don't look at the industry, I look at our client base, which are 300 serious businesses, and they are quite on average, and they are quite progressive, and they are quite optimistic. So, when we see problems, I see opportunities for those that are still in there.
Tom, just for context, can you just describe the LAMBPRO business and what is happening today at Kinross Station and Sonning and across your properties at Holbrook?
So we, in essence, run 10,000 stud ewes. We sell about 3,500 rams a year. Those rams produce about 1.2 to 1.4 million lambs in the industry, nearing sort of 4% of Australia's lambs. So as we've gone down, the model is about driving value, and we try and do that through, promoting branding ewe sales, store lambs, and really the Willowbend and Kinross Station has been about trying to value add, in essence, slaughter lambs. So been a long process. The grading's been a limitation, but it's all about trying to drive value down the supply chain. But it's also it's about having better connection with the end markets. And I think it's really important, not only to attract young people, but it's also good. It's great to be part of a food chain where people understand the customer, what they need, and two-way flow of information.
It's amazing to hear some of those stats around the scale that you're achieving and the impact you're having across your client base, Tom. I think you're a great example of attracting young talent and having a career pathway for them and retaining them and really challenging them to be better professionals in this industry. How do you do it practically as a business and team? How do you find and then retain and inspire talent to be passionate about sheep and this game?
I think, and we try and do through social media, try and promote a positive image for the industry. In the last week alone, I've got 3 really good resumes wanting to work. So as a company, we always portray vision, where we want to be. We put it out there. Not everyone's aligned with that vision, but we own it. And I think in terms of attracting young people, people see that and want to be part of that vision. I mean, all our staff on Monday were rubbing shoulders with the best chefs in Sydney. The next day, they're tagging lambs. So we really try and give our staff a cross-sector experience to try and develop their skills. And that's changed, a lot of the practices on farm, but also changed the passion for what we do by having that understanding, where they're talking literally to some of the best chefs in Singapore right through to what we do on farm.
How big is your team now, Tom? Would you just describe how big it is and how it's structured?
We're pretty flat management. Yeah, certainly 7 staff at the moment. Yeah, including 1 staff member who's jointly, Sophie works within Endeavour Meats. So she looks after a lot of the branding programs, and that's 100% dealing with our clients. Rosie basically runs the show, and we do operate a very flat management, continual conversation model. And yeah, that's so I don't see myself as a boss in a lot of ways. I like to set the vision, set the direction. I still do all the breeding. My passion is breeding. So I still know pretty much every ram we use. I think we used over 100 rams last year. So that's my passion. I mean, Hutch, you'll know my wife says, I forget my kids' names sometimes, but I won't forget a ram's tag. Yeah, that's the way it operates, which incorporates a bit of, I suppose, practical for me, but also try and empower young people coming through.
Tom, it's been a passion of yours since we used to play touch footy on the beach, age 13. You sending letters home to your parents telling them what paddock movements needed to happen from boarding school. Like the endurance of the passion that you have for this industry, it's like no other, mate. I just commend you highly for that.
No, thanks, Hutch.
What is it to have energetic, passionate, well-educated young people coming into the business? What impact has that had on your culture?
It actually gives, I think, a lot of the issues I see, I'm going to flip this away, a lot of people who work in isolation, I really feel sorry for them. And that's unfortunately where a lot of family farms sit. They either have one employee or it's, husband-wife partnership. And unfortunately, that is the reality. But it is hard, and I love speaking to mates about it. Yeah, that probably means they've got to have greater outside connection to get enthusiasm, get ideas. When I turn up and there's 5 or 6 university-educated 20-year-olds, they're all really fired up. It's infectious to me. They're excited about what they're doing, and to me, it becomes contagious. So that's how I get the drive, is because we have these great 20-year-old, university-educated, mostly female, not for any reason, but, we are very McLeod's daughters, but, it is how you get people, and we love new ideas. We love people who want to push the limit. Yeah, so it is infectious, that young culture coming through.
Thanks, Tom. Your website, LAMBPRO.com, you've published an article that speaks to the 5 things driving LAMBPRO's breeding and business direction over the next decade. We've touched on point 1, which is sheep need to address workload. But just to continue on this conversation, how is it that you're breeding animals that can have a lower drenching, dagging, crutching, fly, foot rot labour requirement into the future?
The first thing we've really come, particularly just straight after COVID, was getting rid of the wool. One of the advantages of sheep, you've got multiple markets, you've got wool, you've got meat, and that can be an opportunity, but it also, the increasing cost structure of labour and jobs, you get to the point of whether it starts to add costs in a meat operation. So really getting rid of the wool overcomes shearing, crutching, dagging and flies. The second part is drenching. A lot of people spend a lot of time drenching. And the way seed stock have been managed for generations is getting a few good lambs and basically putting them on grating or in a show shed and creating a perfect environment. It should actually be the opposite. It's a bit like I always say, the way most people run their seed stock operation is a bit like going to a Navy SEAL course and doing one of those obstacle courses and putting ladders next to everything. You might get through quicker, but you're never going to find out who's the toughest and who's the best. So seed stock to me needs to be put under pressure. One of the biggest moves we've been doing is actually 0 to minimal drenching. So really, if you don't drench your ewes, what happens? Some really struggle, fall out of the system. You have to carry them to lamb marking in the back of the gator because they can't handle it. Most of them will be fine. So a lot of these things, particularly when we talk about getting rid of jobs and getting rid of labour, it's actually subjecting sheep to the issues you're trying to avoid. And worm being one of them, trying to get rid of foot issues and everything else. So it's evolution. Sheep have never done that.
How progressed are you on that worm resilience and worm resistance?
Well, there's 2-part. We've always had a trajectory down in worm resistance, and we do that through individual testing. Worm resilience is not objective, but we always say we like to collect dirty data. And when I say dirty data, we like data that's collected in high worm environments.
Tom, what's your vision then for a commercial sheep flock for your clients? Do you have a view on how many DSE they should be able to operate per full-time equivalent or similar?
I mean, in a nutshell, we need to be at 5,000 ewes per labour unit. To do that, you've just got to get rid of a lot of jobs. So all the stuff we do is basically trying to get rid of jobs, because really you go, what do you do on a farm hutch? As a sheep producer, you go and drench your ewes, you might go run them through a footbath, you might go and crutch them, you might go dag them. So really, and what that does, the less jobs you got, and it actually flows into the farm owner stuff, you can focus on things you should be focusing on: feed quality, business decisions, opportunities. And I think reducing the labour component of sheep will make a lot of people be better farmers because they're not doing day-to-day stuff.
Great comment. Your second point in this newsletter, productivity gains need to accelerate.
Well, certainly cost of, every farm enterprise hutch, you would have seen it through farm owners, every cost seems to be on steroids at the moment. Go and try and buy a tractor at the moment. It's almost the point where you look at it and go, we just can't see how you can. So the only way, we probably saw it hutch in the 80s, when our dads were farming, we had these busted old tractors and everyone had busted old utes. And that's that terms of trade issue. I think we're sort of going into another one. Costs are rising at a higher rate. And lamb industry over 20 years, how they've overcome that is actually, it's continually price rises. Now, it's easy to say, that'll keep happening, but we can't guarantee that'll happen. As we saw in 23, there's always going to be plateauing effects. So we've got to look at how can we make more money simply by generating more productivity, more kilograms, but that can't come with a cost. And that's, sheep there's often a lot of production actually comes with a cost, and typically that's feed.
Tom, within this headline, you talk about technology adoption, management change, and genetics. Can you give us your view and your insight on each of those three?
Well, I think you're seeing a lot more sheep handling technologies coming out. We took the backs off sheep in a pro-way bulk handle last year. So we are seeing new technologies that are making life easier. I think genetics, more lambs, more kilograms, less jobs. Really simple trajectory. And that's just an ongoing constant. The issue is if your genetic gain isn't high, at some point costs are going to really beat you. That's every enterprise, cropping, beef, yeah.
Are there any other technologies that really excite you?
No, I think sheep, and you sort of go, I always like to look at time shots, and the famous photo is the old shearing the rams photo. You see a wool shed 50 years ago in a photo. If you took a photo 50 years ago, it's really hard to date them because not much has changed. I think in these next 10 years, we'll look at sheep and a lot of them won't be shorn. You actually won't even need to go in the shed. You won't, all those things that have dominated our jobs. So, the technology and breeding, a lot of that stuff is incremental, but I think we'll see more change in a 15-year period in the sheep industry than what we have seen in the last 100.
Your third point, specialised finishing, will be more widely adopted.
Very much following the beef as we operate. We'll see finishing becoming a control mechanism for processors. The second thing is, if we could get a really good stall lamb market that was viable, that really changes the labour efficiency. Hypothetically, if you could, if we plug into, and I work back and go, if we can basically breed a $400 carcass, 7%, hypothetically, someone should be able to get $200 and something for a stall lamb. That would be highly efficient if we can get a really good breeder feeder system, because all of a sudden so much of the labour is also in lamb finishing, whether it be lucens, chicories, grain, whatever else, it does suck up a lot of labour.
There's some good technologies within the confinement feeding and on-farm feedlot space, and we're seeing a lot of those sort of pop up, aren't we, across sheep meat farms? More of that to continue, do you think?
100%. Feedlotting's been a speculative exercise, but feedlotting hasn't been used to increase marbling. A lot of the Angus and Wagyu programs, it's not only controlling supply, it's actually just trying to increase marbling. So hypothetically, if you could be producing 50% lambs at $1 premium, that's $17.50 for export lambs extra. And that almost becomes a finishing margin. So, to me, that we've got to use finishing as a means of meat quality as well, and that'll change the whole basis of scale in the finishing industry.
And linked to that, and it's almost like a double whammy, if you think about some of your clients that have done that confinement feeding and that on-farm feedlotting really well, what have they been able to achieve in terms of increasing stocking rate?
Well, certainly they can. At the end of the day, if you've got a couple of thousand lambs out of the system, you can certainly run a lot more ewes. So there's no problem with that. The thing with finishing, if you're going to feed 2,000, you might as well feed 10,000. It is very much, if you're going to go and clean the waters, you might as well. So I think we'll just see a lot more scale. And therefore, some people really step up to the plate and expand. Typically, I always say the best feeders are the ones who love going out and looking at their lambs in the feedlot. I've got clients who'll have a stubby every night and walk through and check them, and just, they've got to be really passionate about it. And I think you'll see just become more scalable. That'll drive demand on that stall lamb producer.
So we've seen a massive move towards purely and dedicated cropping farms that have scaled up significantly in the last 10 years. It almost seems to me that we might see that trend more consistently in the red meat space.
Well, I think so. If you sort of think about a shedding ewe flock that's in this feeder lamb game, so in essence, you join them, all the lambs go, and they go and either backgrounded or finished, and take out all those jobs, take out the drenching. You sort of go, life's going to be pretty simple. And I think that's where we need to get to, 5, 6, 7,000 ewes. And if you take the jobs out and then remove that finishing, all of a sudden I think we can have hugely scalable businesses like we do in cropping.
Tom, point 4, we can't box ourselves into a single market or production system. What do you mean by that?
Well, if we look at the Wagyu industry with 300 days on feed, it can be a 3 to 3.5 year process by the time they conceive a Wagyu calf and they sell the product. One thing in this world I don't like about that, the world's it's a very slow boat to turn around. So, you know, we're actually got that down into a year and a bit in most of the lambs. It's because all of a sudden we see financial crises and everything else. So I don't like boxing clients into one model. We want the same lambs to be able to go to Coles and Woolworths that we do to Kinross Station. So they've got to have eye muscle, got to have cover. And Angus cattle have done well because they have every market option.
What other changes do you see your clients pioneering around the production systems that they've been running? Are you seeing them move to 1.3 lambings per year, for example, or what are the other things?
No, I think going back to labour efficiency, a lot of that's fool's gold. It's got to be simple and refined. Lambing at the right time when the grass growth, utilising grass and all those things, I don't think throw out the window. We're going to throw out the window. Really, the production system I can see swinging to a little bit more breeding. And the other reason is the machinery costs. What is this machinery cost going to do to mixed farms? Can a mixed farm go and buy a $800,000 seeder and, you know, tractor? The answer is I'd say they're probably going to become a little bit less agronomic, you know, over time. So maybe less finishing pastures. And I'm focusing 10 years out, and you'll see big, intensive finishing operations will do that for them, and really they become a lower cost breeding model, as opposed to now most people with lucens, chickeries, clovers will sort of do a bit of everything. And that's probably how beef operated 25 years ago, where I can see that becoming a very much low-cost breeding models as opposed to trying to do everything.
And Tom, is it the same product that will serve the domestic demand as for the global, or is there a different article that you're aiming for?
Well, it's interesting, Hutch. The best advice I was ever given, there's as much commonality between the uber premium market in Dubai as there is in Shanghai, as there is in London, as there is in Sydney. So much when we talk about markets, it's about demographics. Hutch, we want our lamb to be in that uber premium demographic. Where you look at our lamb in Sydney, it's all around the financial markets. You know, stockbrokers, black Amex credit cards, as to quote the Charlie Perry, the head of the Wagyu Association. And that's where we want to be with our lamb, because that is relatively consistent. Same in Singapore. You know, look at those restaurants in Singapore. They're all around financial markets. So we want to play in that uber premium market. So I don't look at countries and look at the difference between China, you know, Japan, everything else. I look at the demographic. The key demographic we want for our lamb is households that earn over $150,000 combined. That's our demographic, and that's a global.
That's so interesting. And on reflection and thinking back from that comment, it's mad to try and have lamb competing in the bulk meat space, isn't it?
I always say, and I've made this comment for the last 20 years, Professor David Hughes always says human food consumption works on a debit-credit basis. And I might have even said this in the last podcast, Hutch, but I keep reminding people during the week you eat healthy stuff to try and accumulate credits, you know, by, you know, a few more veggies and stir-fries on a Monday. And all you do is try and create credits to try and spend on Friday night, Saturday and Sunday. So when we talk about clean, green, healthy, yep, we're not in that space. We're in that uber premium, go out for a lamb cutlet, happy to spend with a bottle of wine and your friends. To me, that's where we got to play. We can't do the cheap Monday night meal. Lamb, you know, to me, has got to really look at that. Now, that's a risk as well. There's no doubt, you know, when the world's pumping, all of a sudden that becomes a risk, but we just can't compete with pork and chicken on price.
I love your insight, and very few commodity producers are thinking about the demographic that they pursue within the markets that they serve. It's incredible to hear you speak so accurately around the part of the market that you think we need to be targeting. You talk about on the menu, we've been in and around the cheap seats. What do you mean by that?
Well, if I go to any of the key restaurants in Sydney, you'll have 5 different beef options. You'll have a Wagyu steak, you'll have a marble score 9, marble score 5, and Angus, maybe a grass-fed beef. And in one corner of the menu, you know, I always say you've got a pork dish, a chicken dish, and a lamb dish. Once we get provenance, and interesting enough, if you look at some of the reposts I did this week, I keep saying to the chefs, why can't we go in the middle? KS7 in the middle and actually having options. I still want to see the first specialist lamb restaurant. There's mere tens and tens of thousands of steakhouses around the world. I love the concept and I keep challenging whether it be Matt Moran or Jeff Derome or any of those top chefs in Sydney, why can't we be in the middle? And they often say there's no reason we can't. So KS7 is really also a tack on centre of that menu. High value product, uber premium, something you're not going to eat at home. And that's where when you go out, and that's also an issue for the beef now because you can buy such good steaks. The other issue you got to remember from a price point of view, the higher the marbling, the less the portion size. You don't go and try and eat a 500-gram Wagyu steak. From a price point of view, we can actually keep the chef's price points very similar with less higher density, higher quality meat. So cost, it's not as severe on a plate as you think.
Thanks, Tom. So can you just give us an insight to how proactive you've been with Endeavour Meats to unlock and uncover those high-end markets and to create those opportunities for your clients? How much energy and effort, and what's your strategy in the doing of that?
Well, a lot of it's understanding, number one, and it's pretty simple. Wherever you see high-end Wagyu, if we go to any of the big companies who distribute Wagyus, you can see where their supply chains go. So it's pretty simple to see where the opportunity is, number one. Number two, in every country, we've got a distributor. And there won't be a week I'll have a text or a phone call from a distributor. I've got a client having dinner in the States last night with one of the top food distributors in America, for example. Having that distributor and they're understanding their market. But as I said, understanding that market doesn't change a lot. Top-end New York operates the same as top-end Shanghai. It's what's the offer? What's the point of difference? Beef are now in a scenario, Wagyu's now a commodity. Wagyu's everywhere. Angus beef is a commodity. So the thing we offer is point of difference. Matt Moran at Chop House in Aria next week is launching KF7. There's no marble score 7 lamb in the world. So it offers them a point of difference on their menu, something that people have never tasted before. So that's where we see the psyche of trying to offer points of difference to chefs that work with us.
So point 5, and we've touched on it, mate, is lamb needs to reposition itself to the premium market. Are there any other elements of what you speak to under that headline that we should cover?
Well, interesting enough, we've done a lot of work in the animal welfare / carbon neutrality / regenerative space as well. It's interesting when we talk about premium product, and we've done a lot of work with grass-fed programs based around animal welfare, as their focal point. Interesting enough, everyone wants it, but no one's willing to pay for it. So it's really interesting to understand where the value is. And don't get me wrong, I still think we're going to see a trajectory that will be driven by the retailers in terms of their corporate governance and basically being seen to be good citizens. But it is working out where we can find value in the market. And we've really struggled to find value in those green markets where uber premium, high marbled lamb, it's a really easy trajectory to find how we can position ourselves.
So easier to position a unique product in that way.
100%. Something that, because really a lot of that green stuff is a Monday, Tuesday night, Wednesday night meal. However, people don't want to spend much money during the week because they've all of a sudden probably drank way too much or gone to the supermarket or Westfield spent too much on the weekend. They're always trying to save money during the week. Hence, you see lamb has come back in kilograms consumption per capita and it's been taken up by pork and chicken in essence.
But would it be fair to say, Tom, that if you're that focused in the markets that you're going to pursue, that it doesn't really matter when you're in that part of the market what the consumption trends are?
Absolutely not. I used to get quite sad, that I think we're at Uni Hutch, the average Australian used to eat 11 kilos of lamb. Now they eat 6 or 7. Now, interesting enough, they probably still spend adjusted for in price. They're probably spending the same amount of money. So where lamb sits in the market, I'm growing to be more and more comfortable that weekend meal. However, the one thing I qualify, and Hutch, I'm not sure in your household, I talk about the arch enemy beef at the moment, and just every now and then I'll do lowers myself to have a steak. But I'd rather have a smaller steak that's really, really high quality, 180 gram steak, than a 400 gram cheap rump. So the issue is once you have really good steak, it's hard to go back to the leather, eating bloody really rough stuff. And lamb's no different. Once you eat really, really good lamb, it's hard to go back. So I think all of a sudden, that generates more and more demand in itself. You probably only need 2 cutlets. You probably don't need 4. And even like we have a lot of debates with chefs, they go, we want to have a 4-rib rack. I go, no, way too much, too rich.
It's so true, Tom. Like, you don't want a frozen big bit of barramundi, do you? You want a really nice small piece of salmon.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, great comment. So it sort of seems to me like, and I might have this wrong, that there's an opportunity to have, if marble 6 or 7 beef is the Mercedes, that KF7 lamb is the BMW. Is that a fair comparison? And they can sit
side
by side.
And there's one thing that's more exciting than the Wagyu. When I went to Shanghai 2 years ago, I went to CL, it's like the Olympics for meat, basically. Everyone was there. The Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, the South Americans. The thing I came out of it, and I always say, the world's beef's really good. The Russian beef is exceptional. The Chinese Wagyu was the best I saw. So the difference is you've got such a big supply base of beef in the world, where lamb, we haven't got that supply base. We've got big flocks in India and China. New Zealand's flock is dropping by a stone. So it just means we're less likely, if we create this market, to suffer from oversupply of a high premium product.
And Tom, given the work you've done, is it fair to say that the opportunity within that is unique, and it's unique to the Australian farmer?
I think it is. I think we can reposition the industry and reposition the product. The other thing to remember, our biggest markets for our lamb are America and Japan. A grain-fed 70-day product tastes a lot more like beef, right? What that market doesn't like is that really gamey, rough flavour. They're not used to it. Where we find that Kinross program, or even the Willow Bend, a grain-fed, high marbling, no sort of wool content, is more akin to what they've been used to eating. In one supermarket in the States, for example, and this is where a premium product in a US retailer, in 2 years, our sales have gone up 240% within the same stores. And that's without huge amounts of promotion. That's just basically people like eating it.
Tom, I know your focus and how you set your strategy is very data-driven, but do you allow yourself the opportunity to have a vision for what you think your business can look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now?
I think I do. I think it is. There's no doubt. I think Australian farmland is a good asset to have. I'm very passionate about having really good farmland. I'm very passionate about the industry. I don't have I don't sit here and say I want to sell X amount of rams. My aim is always breed a few more than last year, make sure our clients are happy where we can, to try and build that. And Hutch, you once told me, and I've never forgotten it, in our sort of business, if your clients are happy, they talk, and then we grow. So to me, I just focus on, trying to create opportunities, trying to educate our clients, and then hopefully, if they talk positively, we can grow our business.
I think it's a great point, Tom. So many businesses offer an average outcome for their clients and then forever have to try and swim ahead of the wave to try and expand their market or grow their business. But if you're doing a 6-star service and providing a great outcome for your clients, you kind of get to lean back into the wave and just enjoy the ride. Is that a fair comment?
It is hard. Anything hard, and in this meat space, I often say sometimes you're the leader, sometimes you're the bleeder. It's been hard, and it's been hard because it's been hard to get value down the supply chain. That's been a real issue because we haven't been able to grade. So it hasn't been smooth sailing, but, there's been a lot of clients have done really well out of it. Now what we've got to do is expand that number of clients who, buy increased volumes.
Tom, on the flip side, as your business has grown, what's been your biggest entrepreneurial challenge?
I think you sort of sometimes you wonder whether, I go, do I spend too much time doing the blue sky stuff? And rightly or wrongly, but it's genuinely what I believe in. And I sit here thinking, we're trying to position our clients, as I say, 10 years out the whole time. So it's getting the basic day-to-day stuff as well as getting that visionary stuff, in that same picture.
Thanks, mate. So if we've got some listeners here who are coming back into the industry and they might have had a couple of years at home out of ag college or not, but, they're in a mixed farming system and they do like the smell of diesel and they like the bright and shiny and, they're thinking about what the business model might be that they take their farms forward into the next generation. What would be your word to them just as a plug for the positivity that you talk about in the red meat and the sheep meat space?
I think if we look at agriculture, grain is a global market and it is just going to be, it's very hard to establish point of difference. So it's all about efficiency and scale. Where sheep, I do think, for a middle-sized operator, offers a lot of ability, and particularly with some of these markets, to offer a sustainable business model, particularly as these machinery costs, fertiliser, everything else keeps going up, that marginal increase gets harder. Where I think sheep, the average sheep, I literally think in 10 years, we're going to be so much better off than what we are now. And, what people know as sheep, as work and everything else, I think is going to be fundamentally different in 10 years.
Amazing, Tom. And so how do people, if they're interested, reach out to you and LAMBPRO? What's the best way for them to make?
Oh, people just jump on our website, give us a ring, have a chat. Yep. So, we're always open for a chat. We opened our doors. We've got a field day in 10 days' time, probably before this podcast. But we have a vision. We're very open that's not everyone's got that same shared vision. I've got mates who are dead set keen on superfine wool, and that's great. They've got a vision, they've got an alignment. But I think we own our vision, rightly or wrongly. We can really, hence why we put that 5 points. It really shows this is our direction. And really our job then is trying to get our sheep and our systems to align with that future direction.
Tom, I wrapped up our last podcast, I think, with a similar question. I'm going to give it to you again. Personally, what are you most proud of about the business journey that you've succeeded in for the duration of your career?
I'm probably most proud of the people that have come through. And I genuinely mean that. You look at Rosie, who pretty much runs the show. She won the Xander McDonald Best Person in the Ministry under 35. And the beauty about it, we've got so many people coming through who are so talented to have a big impact. And I'm just proud that I've been a part of their journey. And as I said, gives me energy, gives me satisfaction. Maybe one day it could be my kids. That's up to them. But, I love that people. And I love to see our clients as well. We've been with clients we've sold 5 rams to, and they've bought 10 different farms in 20 years, and now we sell 100 rams to them. Watching their journey is, and don't ever discount as a stud that small bloke buying 2 rams, because all of a sudden, they might be a 100 ram person. So, that's been exciting watching clients on the journey as well.
Mate, it's been great to connect, and don't want to sound like a peanut or a dickhead here, but the impact you and your vision and your team have had on the industry over 30 years, you're pioneering, and the fact that you've taken what was a very average commodity and reshaped it so that it can be a premium product on the best menus in the best locations around the world. That is a monumental achievement that, I hope at some point you and Phoebe and your family and Rick and Trish and your team sit back and reflect on having achieved. It is unbelievable credit for you to have achieved.
No, thanks, Hutch. I enjoy what I do. So, for me, that's our satisfaction. I like chasing sheep. If I won $1 billion in the lottery, I wouldn't do any different. So it's an exciting time being in agriculture. Hard 3 years. You've just got to, and the way I say to our clients, I love boxing, as you know, Hutch. I say you've been, and I say to our clients, you've just copped 10 punches to the head. You're in the corner. Every part of you wants to drop to the ground, but you've just got up and you've got to get up quickly and make it a punch. And, that's the message we've got for our clients and any of our producers in the South. You've got to get up out of that corner and start punching quick. I think we can still win in this next 3 or 4 years and win well. So it's exciting.
Tom, thank you, mate. Great to see you. And, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Hutch. Thanks so much for having me.